All right, if you're a PhD candidate, especially in business or economics, you've probably hit that wall where the term qualitative research philosophy just sounds like this terrifying, impenetrable cloud of academic jargon. You know the feeling, right? It's enough to make anyone absolutely dread writing their methodology chapter. Well, in this explainer, we are completely demystifying all of that. We're taking the abstract and making it entirely concrete, giving you a crystal clear path from high-level philosophy directly down to practical field application, all based on the fantastic coursework of Professor Asak Dr. Fiznik Marina. Okay, let's dive right into this. By the time we wrap up today, you're going to be able to critically analyze your own epistemological and ontological positioning. You'll know exactly how to scientifically design an advanced qualitative methodology, apply high-level thematic analysis, thoroughly evaluate methodological quality, and deeply reflect on your own role as the researcher. Think of this as your definitive roadmap to mastering qualitative inquiry. Here is our blueprint for the explainer. We're going to start with research philosophy, move through the interpretivist and constructivist approach, look at the power of subjectivity, discuss methodological flexibility, and finally, we'll get into the practical tools with in-depth interviews. So, starting off with Section 1, Research Philosophy. Now, the absolute first thing we need to do is untangle two massive terms that form the bedrock of your work, epistemology and ontology. Basically, epistemology is all about the nature of knowledge, asking how we can possibly know the social reality around us. Think of it as the specific camera lens you choose to shoot with. Ontology, on the flip side, deals with the nature of reality itself, what actually exists out there. This is the landscape you're photographing. Getting these straight is absolutely crucial because they dictate exactly how you, as the researcher, conceptualize reality and produce scientific knowledge. And that brings us to a really huge paradigm shift. See, traditional quantitative research often talks about discovering reality, treating it like some hidden treasure or an objective entity sitting out there completely independent from individuals. Well, qualitative research firmly rejects that. Instead, it's all about constructing knowledge. Reality is socially constructed. You don't just find knowledge sitting under a rock. You build it through this dynamic, somewhat messy interaction between you and your subjects. You're aiming to interpret meanings, not just measure isolated, disconnected facts. Moving smoothly into Section 2, the interpretivist and constructivist approach. This perfectly illustrates how the interpretivist approach really leans into the idea that social reality is understood strictly through the subjective perspectives of human actors. Meaning is a direct product of human experience. Constructivism actually takes this a step further. It emphasizes that reality isn't this fixed, rigid structure at all. It's fluid. It is continuously constructed through social interaction. Truth isn't just one singular thing here. It's pluralistic, and it heavily depends on the cultural and institutional context those people are operating in. So here's a really crucial takeaway for you. In interpretivism, you, the researcher, are not some outsider peering in through a one-way mirror. You just can't stand outside the research process. You actually become an active participant. You are right there in the reality of it all, actively engaging to interpret the discourses, the actions, and the experiences of your participants. You are literally a part of the meaning-making machine. Which leads us right into Section 3, the power of subjectivity. I want to pose a very direct question to the academic researchers and PhD students tuning in right now. Is subjectivity a scientific weakness? Think about it. For years, traditional quantitative methods have conditioned us to fear bias, to scrub out anything personal, and to hunt for this pure, untainted objectivity. But in advanced qualitative research, we have to completely unlearn that fear. We literally need to reframe what a lot of people consider a flaw into a uniquely powerful feature. Subjectivity is a core resource. It is absolutely not a methodological weakness. In fact, the personal experiences, the perceptions, the raw interpretations of your participants, that forms the absolute essence of your research data. Meaning is produced interactively, and honestly, it just doesn't exist outside of its social, cultural, and historical context. So context isn't some pesky control variable you need to isolate away. It is an integral, living, breathing part of your analysis. All right, let's look at Section 4, methodological flexibility. So if you look at traditional quantitative research, your structure is pretty much locked in from day one, right? You build a survey, you deploy it, and you don't touch it. But qualitative research, it demands an adaptable, evolving design. This flexibility is literally one of its fundamental characteristics. It gives you the freedom, and really this superpower, to reformulate your questions, expand your sample size, and completely modify your data collection techniques mid-study based on what you're actually learning from your subjects. Because of this, qualitative data is captured in some incredibly diverse ways, from audio recorders and quick field notes to really deep line-by-line policy implementation analysis. Thanks to that methodological flexibility, you don't just blindly follow a strict, unyielding plan. Actually, you have to react dynamically to empirical reality and the brand new signals emerging straight from the data itself. That makes your research infinitely more sensitive to social dynamics, vastly increasing your chances of making brand new theoretical discoveries. Let's move to Section 5 and see how this builds into real, practical application with in-depth interviews. In-depth interviews are basically the gold standard when it comes to exploring subjective experiences and personal meanings. The whole process flows in 3 main steps. Step 1, you build a flexible dialogue. You're creating a safe space for deep reflection. Step 2, you don't just act like a robot reading down a structured list of questions. You naturally adapt your questions to the flow of the conversation and the specific responses you're getting. And step 3, by doing all this effectively, you start discovering the latent, hidden dimensions of social and organizational phenomena. You're uncovering the underlying logic behind individual actions that a simple multiple-choice survey would completely miss. Now, if you are a PhD candidate in business and economics, mastering this kind of narrative information is your ultimate goal. The sheer richness of the qualitative data you gather from these in-depth interviews is exactly the raw material you need to construct advanced, complex, theoretical interpretations. You aren't just summarizing what people said, you are actively theorizing why they operate the way they do in these highly complex economic and organizational environments. But to do any of this effectively, we always have to return to a core truth. The researcher must continuously reflect on their own role and the impact of their position on the interpretation process. In qualitative research, you are the ultimate instrument of study. Your background, your biases, your unique perspectives, they're all acting as a filter for the data. Openly acknowledging this through rigorous methodological reflection doesn't weaken your study. No way. It actually dramatically increases its transparency and its scientific reliability. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this explainer today, from the high philosophical clouds of epistemology and ontology, all the way down to the gritty, practical reality of conducting a flexible, in-depth interview. But remember, qualitative research is never just a passive endeavor. It requires you to look inward just as intensely as you look outward. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative question as you go forth and design your own methodology. How will your own subjective perspective shape the reality you are about to research? Think really deeply about that. Let it guide your approach. Thank you so much for joining me, and I absolutely cannot wait to explore more fascinating academic frameworks with you next time.